שלום לכולם. הנה עכשיו. שלום לכולם, השידור יחל בשעה 6, שידור הערב. שידור הערב עם מנהל סוכנות החלל הישראלית, אורי אורון, מנהלה 12 של סוכנות החלל האמריקאית נאס"א, צ'רלי בולדן, יחל בשעה 6. שלום רב ושבוע טוב, לא סתם שבוע טוב, שבוע החלל הישראלי. שמי איתי לוי ואני מסוכנות החלל הישראלית, וזהו ערב הפתיחה של שבוע החלל הישראלי, העשירי במספר שמקיימת סוכנות החלל הישראלית במשרד החדשנות, המדע והטכנולוגיה. מזל טוב לשבוע החלל. לצורך התרגום של האירוע הערב, אנחנו מזמינים אתכם ללחוץ על כפתור ה-CC שמופיע לכם עכשיו בשורת הזום, ולאפשר כתוביות. האירוע יתנהל בשפה האנגלית. אתם כמובן גם מוזמנים ומוזמנות לפתוח את מצלמות המחשב שלכם כדי שנראה אתכם, בייחוד אם אתם מתכוונים לדבר הערב. שבוע החלל הישראלי מתקיים בכל שנה כחגיגה של פעילויות חלל בכל הארץ, בהשתתפות של מאות אלפי צעירים ובוגרים כאחד. האירועים מתקיימים להנצחת מורשתו של טייס החלל הישראלי, הראשון, אילן רמון. השנה אנחנו מקיימים את אירועי השבוע באופן מקוון, אבל זה לא מפריע לנו לקיים מגוון רב של הפעלות, משדרים, הרצאות אסטרונאוטים, כנסים, משחקים ואתגרים. לכל המידע ולכל האירועים, אתם מוזמנים להיכנס לאתר סוכנות החלל הישראלית, אני מקווה שחלקכם צופים וצופות במשדר הזה באתר כרגע. הערב מחכה לנו משדר חגיגי במיוחד, מפגש בין שני ראשי סוכנויות, מנכ"ל סוכנות החלל הישראלית מר אורי אורון, יארח את מנהלה ה-12 של סוכנות החלל האמריקאית נאס"א, מר צ'רלי בולדן, לשיחה מרתקת על תחום החלל, על עידן החלל החדש, ועל איפה במערכת השמש אנחנו צפויים למצוא את עצמנו בתוך עשור או שניים. אני מעביר את השידור אליך, אורי, ומאחל לכולנו ערב מהנה.
אוקיי, ערב טוב לכולם. Good evening, Charlie.
Good evening, Yuri. How are you?
I'm great. Great seeing you again. Hope you will. Everything is okay. It's good morning. It's morning actually right now, isn't it?
It's actually morning, and but everything is okay. It's a little chilly here for me. You know, it's in the 20s this morning. I think is less than zero there for you in Israel. So it's pretty chilly.
Yeah, I can see that. But it looks like you are on the right dressing.
I am. I'm dressing warm, so I apologize. Although I may look like a snowman to some of your audience, but I just came in from outside, so I'm dressed a little warm.
Charlie, I will start with a quick introduction to make sure that everybody knows who you are. And Charlie Bolden, that's you. You hold a bachelor degree in electrical science and a master in system management. Charlie is a retired major general from the U.S. Marine Corps, and he served both as a fighter pilot and as a test pilot before becoming an astronaut. Charlie flew 4 times into space on boards of NASA's space shuttle, conducting numerous of scientific experiments and missions. Deploying the Hubble's space telescope is being just one of them, and that's exciting. Aside from his role as an astronaut, he had a fascinating career in NASA in a wide range of positions, and of course was nominated as NASA's 12th administrator in 2009. Since he retired from NASA, Charlie is involved in many space ventures, and I hope we can hear about a few of them today. Charlie is married and have 2 children. Mr. Bolden, just to make sure that I'm right on the information, is there anything that we missed or anything big that we missed trying to understand your amazing career?
You did not miss anything, except there is one thing that I would add, and it's how my wife Jackie and I really miss being there in person with you. Many of the folk in the audience will know that for the last almost 30 years, we've generally spent Space Week or at least sometime at the end of January with you all there in Tel Aviv and Jerusalem and all around Israel. So we are both very sorry that we're not there in person, but as soon as the border opens up again, we plan to come for for our annual pilgrimage. So since we've missed it the last 2 years, but we have lots of friends there. I actually, one of my key classmates when I went to test pilot school back in the 70s was Eran Ramat, who lives up in Herzliya, and Yuri, you know him because he was probably one of your instructors going through school or something like that. But we have many friends there, and we miss being with you there in person.
Yeah, I contacted him last Thursday, and he says hi. We flew together when I was a very, very, very young pilot, almost about 30 years.
That's right.
From now, and I hope the skies will open soon, and if not, space will still be open for us.
I think it will. And you and I talked a little bit earlier in the week about the critical importance of trying to get the message out in this space week there in Israel about how important space is. We generally tend to think about human space flight when we think of space, but it's critically important to the people there in Israel because of the technology that you promote, the technology that you develop. Most of us outside of Israel look at Israel as an incubator nation. I sent you a list of companies we've worked in the past with Space IL that I'm keeping my fingers crossed. We're finally going to get a successful landing of their lander on the moon. They had
two landers.
Two landers.
Yeah.
Well, most people don't realize they have a successful orbiter. So, but everybody gets excited about landing, and we're going to do that. We also work with Space Pharma, a company that has a product called Lab on a Chip. We've worked with Aleph Farms that's actually producing meat, and we're working with them and trying to help them figure out how to move that operation to space, where we think it can be done much more efficiently. And then finally, Defense Solutions, a company that we're trying to help promote here in the United States for security, not just on the national security front, but for security of organizations and companies and the like. So lots of things going on in Israel, and we just want to let the students know that there are wonderful opportunities for them if they'll just get interested in science and math and all that other kind of stuff.
So thanks so much, and I'm pretty sure that our audience will be part of this amazing group in the very, very near future. And since you just mentioned the Space Week and everything that we've done here in the past few years, and this is our 10th anniversary for Space Week, and that's a real big celebration for us. So we have a little surprise for you. Let's watch it together. Itai, please.
רגל האירועים הגיעו לישראל ראשי סוכנויות חלל מרחבי העולם, בהם גם צ'ארלס בולדן הוא ראש נאס"א.
When people say NASA, then you think about Ilan Ramon, the Israeli astronaut who we unfortunately lost on the Columbia shuttle 10 years ago on the 1st of February 2003, because he represented you. He was from this region. He was an incredible pilot, but most importantly, a credible individual, a good father and husband and friend of a lot of people. And he had worked an experiment, many experiments as a matter of fact, but one in particular on board Columbia. They had completed an incredible mission, incredibly successful mission, when we lost them during the last phases of reentry in February 2003. So hopefully you do think about him, particularly during this Space Week here in Israel, when we commemorate his life, but most importantly, his legacy.
So yeah, you haven't changed a lot.
Just a teeny bit. A lot more gray hair, turning to white, and trying to grow I'm trying to get like Itai, but I've got a ways to go before my beard is as neat as his.
So Charlie, I want to thank you so much for all of the years of the support of the Israeli Space Week. It's a tremendous effort, and thanks so much. And before we dive into the present and actually into the future of space, it will be great to hear from you. And actually, if you can tell our audience today a bit about yourself, your history as an astronaut, about the missions and projects that you were involved during your years in service in NASA, and probably highlight one of those, a few of those achievements. So the floor is yours.
I would love to, and I will tell everyone I'm a person who grew up never intending to be an astronaut. I did not dream of being an astronaut as I was growing up in Columbia, South Carolina, in the I won't tell you what years, but in the earlier days of my life. But I had teachers and I had other people who really encouraged me to get interested in math and science. I ended up going to the United States Naval Academy, and although I had thought that I would never become a Marine Corps officer, I ended up doing that, and that led to me doing something else that I thought I would never do, which was actually to become a pilot like you. And that was really a significant change in my life, because becoming a pilot in the Marine Corps, eventually going to test pilot school in the late 1970s, where I met Eran Ramat and became a fellow pilot with him. That led me to meeting the late Dr. Ron McNair, who we lost on the first shuttle accident, the loss of Challenger, on January 28th in 1986, just 10 days after I had landed from my first space shuttle mission. But Ron had encouraged me to apply for the space shuttle program when I felt that I would not be selected. In fact, he asked me one time if I was going to apply for the space program after I first met him. I told him, not on your life. And he was incredulous. He just could not believe it. He said, why not? I said, Ron, they'd never pick me. And he looked at me, and I want the kids to listen to this, because sometimes you put these kinds of pressures on yourself. I said, they never picked me. And he looked at me and very sternly, and he said, you know, that is the dumbest thing I ever heard. How do you know if you don't ask? For the students that may be listening today, don't let anybody tell you what you cannot do. You know, believe in yourselves, believe in what your parents and teachers have told you, and dream big dreams. You may not want to go to space, but you may want to help other people do that. And so that's what this whole week is about, is trying to open up your imagination and help you understand how, especially in a country like Israel, you can play a role in the future of space exploration. So that's how I happened to apply for the space program, and how I happened to become a NASA astronaut, after never having dreamed of that as a young kid. So, you know, I would say dream big dreams, never give up on those dreams, and you can do whatever you want to do. I did fly 4 times on the space shuttle. My first flight ended very successfully. It was a normal kind of flight, if you will. But then we had the accident, lost Challenger. We recovered and came back to fly again. And then my second flight was when we deployed the Hubble Space Telescope in 1990. And that, although we thought it would be pretty big, we had no idea of how great Hubble would be and how it would open the world, the universe, to more understanding than we had ever had before. And then my third flight was one that looked at Earth itself and our atmosphere, tried to help us understand things like weather and climate and what was happening to the planet. And then my final flight was the first joint Russian-American mission before I left the program in 1994, which turned out to be just a super experience for me, because I had an opportunity to work with Sergei Krikalev and Vladimir Titov, 2 experienced Russian cosmonauts, with their support team, both medical and flight control people, that formed a friendship that lasts to this day. So I learned that, you know, given a common mission, you can work with anyone, that we all have to learn how to understand each other and be willing to work cooperatively to advance the cause of humanity. And so that, in a nutshell, that's kind of my experience there. But the biggest thing for the kids is don't ever let anybody tell you what you can't do. You know, study really hard, work hard, never be afraid of failure. I love to point to Space IL. You know, they took a risk. They had a successful orbiter, had an unsuccessful lander, but they're coming back, and we're going to make sure that we get it successfully on the surface of the moon. If you look at how many times America failed at launching rockets into space before we sent Alan Shepard, our first astronaut, successfully to space, you'd probably say, why in the world did you all keep going? And we kept going for the same reason that you do there in Israel, because we believe in what we can do to benefit humanity, and we believe in the future. And that's what this whole week is all about.
Yeah, I totally agree. And again, well, we're not talking only about failures, because there is many success as well, but failure is part of the learning process. You cannot achieve those tremendous goals without fail from time to time. That's what moves us forward. It always does. I think Itai will now start to lead the conversation with the youngsters, right, Itai?
We also have a presentation from you, Charlie, right? You wanted to share some slides.
I have some slides. If you can release it and let me do it, I'll pick a few of them and I'll try to walk through them really quick to kind of generate some questions from the kids. But it's telling me that I've been disabled from sharing my slides. So if I can't, if somebody else can do them, okay, we're good now. So let me do this real quickly. And I think if you all will just verify that you can see what I'm seeing. Everybody in the audience should have an idea of where we're looking at right now. So because I'm not there in person, I will ask the question and I will assume that everybody says that's the Middle East, and it absolutely is. And because here in America, this is Sunday for us. So, you all went to synagogue. Some of you did yesterday or a Friday night. I just came from my church this morning. And all of us around the world, no matter what faith we happen to be, this is kind of where everything started, we believe. And that's why this is an image that we took from onboard the shuttle Discovery from about 600 kilometers above Earth after we had deployed the Hubble Space Telescope. Some of you have never seen your home country this way, but Israel is right up in here. This is the Gulf of Aqaba going down to Jordan here, the Sinai Peninsula, northeastern Egypt, the Nile River. And the way we believe it from, let me go back, the way that I was taught and we teach in the Torah, when the children of Israel were taken into bondage in Egypt and Moses led them out, he led them right across the northern part of the Sinai Peninsula to what we refer to as the land of milk and honey, to what is today Israel. So we have actually, believe it or not, the importance of space exploration with satellites now from space. We've actually been able to detect underground ancient camel trails that we may believe actually be some of the path that the children of Israel followed coming out of Egypt, going into what is now Israel. So space allows us to see certain things. This is for the benefit of the kids. And this is really quick. It's a time-lapse photography that's showing you what's happening to our planet today. So we started taking data back in the 1880s, and I'm going to show you all the way up to 2015. The big point of this whole time-lapse photography is, as you see more colors appear, more yellow and red, that says we're not doing a very good job of protecting our planet. Our planet is warming. There's only so much heat that you and I as human beings can sustain, can live with. This is why we're having difficulty growing crops in Israel and around the world, because we've got to get the increasing temperature of our planet under control. So that's really important. Because people always ask me, okay, where's your spacesuit? You're not wearing your spacesuit. NASA doesn't let me keep my spacesuit. So this is a picture of me on my third space shuttle mission. And you may be wondering how I know that. It's because of the glasses I'm wearing. These were an experimental set of glasses that we had a fish line that was holding them to my face so they wouldn't fall off. That's why I know this. This is a launch and entry suit that we used to wear that allowed us to safely go to space and come back after we lost Challenger. And this is my crew from that flight. Here you can see that in space, there is no up or down. Gravity is overcome because we're going around Earth so rapidly. And so gravity and centrifugal force battle each other, and we end up feeling like we're floating. You can see it's pretty roomy. This was in the middeck of the old space shuttle when we flew it. These are some of our different foods, some stuck on the wall. There's some tortillas for people who like Mexican food. We had all kinds of goodies to eat and drink. And here I am doing an experiment with Dr. Franklin Chang Diaz. One of the things that people ask all the time is, what do you do in space? Well, we do lots of experiments, lots of scientific experiments. And I mentioned Space Pharma earlier. Today, Space Pharma continues to do experiments on the International Space Station. And many of them with their laboratory on a chip is doing some of the same kind of research we were doing. One of the last things I'll show you, this is the James Webb Space Telescope. And almost everybody's familiar with this today. We successfully deployed all of the segments of the mirror. It has 18 different segments of the mirror. If you want to have a feel for how big James Webb is, this is a human being. This is a technician right here. That's a technician right there. James Webb was folded into a very small package and put on the top of an Ariane rocket that was launched out of a place called Kourou in French Guiana on the east coast of South America, and is now almost to its destination, about 1.5 million kilometers away from Earth, where it's going to increase our knowledge of the universe way beyond what we learned even with the Hubble Space Telescope. So that's James Webb. I'm going to skip this next slide and show you, because Eitan Striby, who all of you should be very proud of and should know, this is going to be his home for a couple of weeks at the end of March. He is going to be on the first AX-1 crew with Axiom Space. And once again, we'll have an Israeli astronaut who will be in space doing experiments. And this is going to be his home away from home for a while. It orbits Earth about 400 kilometers up. It's been there for about 21 plus years. And it is an absolutely incredible facility where we do lots of science that I'm going to show you now, and then we'll go back to your question. So this will take about 2 minutes, and I'll let you look at it. So if Eitan's looking in, he knows he's going to be up here doing some of this stuff and exercising on the exercise apparatus and floating around having fun in space. This was our first homegrown food. That's lettuce grown in space. Okay, so I'm going to stop there and we'll see what kind of questions we've generated with that. You know, you'll have astronaut Striby who will be doing all kinds of exercises, and he'll be working hard, but he'll also be having a lot of fun. So I can hardly wait to hear his experiences when he comes back.
Okay, kids, that's your time.
Yeah. So, just one more second. Yeah. Okay, so it's actually always mind-blowing to realize we have 21 years of people living in space. And we have with us this evening both high school students and university students and young professionals. And our first question is from Carmi. Carmi, you can ask your question now.
Hello, I'm Carmi. I'm 16. I live in Mitzpe Netofa in the north of Israel. I must say I'm extremely excited, and it's a great honor to ask you a question. And my question is, what do you think the next generation of space professionals and astronauts needs to know? What skills should we have? Thank you.
Yeah, you are already learning things in school that I think will equip you very well for having an opportunity to fly in space. Math, science, engineering are critical particularly for people who want to be like Eitan and fly in space. But we also need people who can communicate, who are good, who can produce movies and produce stories that help astronauts like me tell what it was like to be in space. As much as I love to talk about my experiences, I'm not really good at being able to put things in simple terms a lot of times. So we need communicators. We actually need attorneys, people who can help us with legal decisions. One of the hottest fields of law today is space law, because we don't have a lot of laws about how we operate and how we collaborate in space. So almost anything that you can dream of. I would say, Carmi, for you, follow your passion. There is something that really excites you in school. Follow that and stick with it, and don't let other people tell you, no, you should be doing this. If you follow your passion and you do something that you really, really, really enjoy, I think you'll do really well at it, and it will enable you to go to greater heights than you could ever imagine.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Carmi.
So I think that's a great message. Follow your passion, and with that, we can also already go to our next question from the audience. And we have with us Karin. Karin, you wanna unmute and ask your question?
Hello.
Hi, Karin.
Hello. My name is Karin Garber. I'm 16 years old from Ashdod. And my question is, do you think youth and children will be able to travel to space in the near future?
Karim, I actually believe that provided we can continue to make spacecraft as safe as they seem to have been here lately, the most important thing is getting the cost down. You know, the cost of per pound or per kilogram to get stuff to space has gone down markedly from what it used to be when I started flying. That's going to be the biggest challenge to being able to fly just normal people. We've already flown a young man who was 18 years old. He only went on he went on a suborbital space flight with Blue Origin, so went into space and came back down. But there's no reason that we can't fly young people who are even younger as you all get more and more interested. What I would recommend to you, Karin, is I'm certain that that Director Oren and the Israel Space Agency would love to have a group of young people come in and form an advisory group to help him tell the story of why space is important to Israel. He and I talked last week, and a common concern we have both in Israel and the United States is people who provide the funding for us to do what we do frequently become satisfied that things are going okay, and they forget that, no, we've got to be consistent in our funding of space programs, and we've got to have programs that we put together that last a long time. So I would suggest that you chair a group of young people and go in and see if you can get an audience with Director Oran and say, we want to be the youth advisory group for the Israel Space Agency. And we'll get to flying young people a lot quicker if you push us than if you just depend on us coming to that conclusion on our own. We're slow.
Definitely. Help us helping you. Actually, help all of us. Definitely.
Okay, that sounds like a great idea. I hope we can we will hear more from you, Karin, in the near future. We're waiting.
We don't have a lot of space in the office, but we do have a lot of space. Definitely. Join us.
In our minds. Yeah, definitely. And we only have time now for one more question. We have some more time at the end for more questions, but now we have our last question from Shelly. Shelly, you can unmute and ask your question now.
Hello, my name is Shelly Fedman. I'm 15 years old and I'm from Kiryat Chaim. My question is, you had a long and successful career. So for you, what was the most important thing that you did?
Oh, Shelly, great. Boy, that's hard. I can talk about the missions that I flew and the experiments I did. I think the thing that lasts for me the most, the longest period of time, and the thing that I cherish the most is actually the preparation and the conduct of my very last space shuttle mission, my fourth flight. And I say that because I knew it was going to be my last flight. So every evolution was really, for me, I'm a very emotional person. So every time I did a part of training, it was very emotional because I knew that would probably be the last time I would do that. But what made it so memorable was the opportunity to get together with my Russian counterparts, people that I really did not want to fly with when it started out. I talked about what space does for you. When I was originally told that my next flight would be to fly the first joint Russian-American mission, my response was, count me out. I don't have any interest in flying with any Russians because they've trained all their lives to kill me, and I've trained all my life to kill them. And the response from my boss was pretty quick. He said, "Hey, there are two guys in town. Why don't you go to and have dinner with them tonight and talk, and you all get to know each other, and then come back and talk to me in the morning." And I did. We went to dinner with a mutual friend in Washington, D.C., and we had a very pleasant dinner. And almost immediately, it was Sergei Krikalev, who spoke fluent English, was a young Russian engineer who had become a cosmonaut, and at that time had been in space longer than any other human being, except for one, Dr. Polyakov, who had spent 400 and some odd days in space. But his companion was Vladimir Titov, a military test pilot and cosmonaut who spoke not a word of English. So Sergei was the interpreter for the evening. It would be like me coming to dinner with Director Oran and everybody speaking in Hebrew and he having to interpret for me. That's sort of the way it was for at least for Vladimir that night. But our conversation immediately turned to our kids and our families, and we started almost immediately talking about what we dreamed of for the world and what kind of world we wanted to leave to our kids. Not anything about us, not anything about what was going on between our two countries, the difficulties we were having, but we felt that through our flight and our training together, we could set an example for how people on a common mission with a common set of goals can do things. Last year, some of you will remember when we opened up Space Week at Space Tech that the Ramon Foundation put on. I hosted a fireside chat, and we had Sarah Bint Al-Amiri, who was the Minister of Advanced Science and Technology from UAE. We had Ellen Stoffen, back then the director of the Smithsonian Air and Space Museum, and Gwen Shotwell, the chief operating officer and the president of SpaceX. Three very different women from very different backgrounds. And what they talked about was the future of space exploration, the future of humanity. And what I found so rewarding for me personally, like my last flight, was the friendships that I think were formed in that very brief period of time when they were all able to understand that although they may be from diverse parts of the world, we all have the same kind of thing we want to do. We want to make your area of the world, that area that I showed you, the Middle East, we want to make that safe and secure for everybody. We want to make sure that young people like you have an opportunity to grow up and thrive and benefit humanity. So that's why I cherish the memories from my last flight, flying and making friends with Sergei and Vladimir.
That is a great answer, and let me try to connect a few dots here, Charlie. I'm not sure if you're aware, but we started this week, actually this morning, with a talk with the United Arab Emirates astronaut.
Great.
He was made basically a Zoom talk in Arabic to thousands of Israeli youngsters, talking about space, bring it to a very, very, very normal and ordinary level. And that was I think that was a very, very, very exciting moment to all of us, not just talking about space, but talking about space with people that used to be, not a long time ago, not part of our friends. That was an amazing morning, I believe. So it exactly connected the dots, exactly as you said, with your Russian counterparts.
And both of us as military men, and you particularly as an intelligence specialist, you recognize, or we both recognize, the importance of peacefully coexisting is very difficult. It is not easy at all, but it takes two people, at least, from two camps who are willing to sit and talk and try to find common things where we can start. We are not getting along with the Russians right now, we in the United States. But I can tell you the crews on board the International Space Station, the cosmonauts and the astronauts are working diligently to try to make sure that everything they do benefits humanity and that they continue to serve as the example of what we can do between our two countries if we let cooler heads prevail. So we must all understand this is not magic. It's not easy. It takes really hard work, and it's going to take all of you that I see on the screen to make it happen.
I totally agree. I totally agree. And we can talk a lot about the potential of connecting people in space and connecting nations in space. I have a strong belief that we're going to see even further progress in that regard in our region very, very soon. So we talk about your career in NASA, Charlie, and not surprisingly, it turns out that we are on quite a journey through space and time, and that brought us all the way from the time of the Space Shuttle program all the way to the new space area. I know you don't like the term of new space area, but I will use it anyway. So how would you articulate the essence of the change? You mentioned earlier the reduce of cost, but how do you articulate the essence of this change in space industry and the ecosystem that we are seeing and we are watching? What do you think about it? What is the main factors for this new space revolution?
I think the biggest difference between what people call new space and what many of us consider old space is the fact that we still have a lot of the same players, but we have new participants like the companies I named over in Israel, like Space.il, like Space Pharma, Aleph Farms, Defense Solutions. We now have governments, particularly here in the United States. We finally came to the realization that as we develop technology and as we develop systems that allow us to do the kinds of things that we want in medicine, in space flight, or you name it, or in aeronautics, it's companies around the world that actually do the work and produce the systems. And at some point, they understand how to operate those systems much more efficiently than the government can. It's government's place to spend the big money up front, to take the financial risk up front, and also to take the human risk if it's a human endeavor. And then once we feel relatively comfortable, and I always use the term relatively comfortable because space flight and anything we do, as you mentioned earlier, there is risk involved. Anything worth doing has risk with it. So government should take the big risk up front, but then once we are relatively comfortable with what we're doing, we should pass that off to the private sector. And that's what you see being done in Israel in spades, where that's the reason we call you the incubator nation, is because government has taken what they've learned in expertise, passed it into the private sector, and then let the private sector thrive by providing things back to government. The space radiation vest that we have flown before and that will be flown on Orion when it flies Artemis 1, that's from an Israeli company that used technology that they developed in collaboration with the Israeli government, but now they do that on their own because they're really good at it, and they can keep going so that the Israeli government doesn't have to spend time and money and effort in doing the kind of research that they can do in helping make life safer for people who are traveling from here, say to Mars or even to the moon.
Yeah, excellent. I should brought you to the government. I was in the government meeting today. I should brought you with me. But looking at the future, and this is totally new. We just recently learned of the new and exciting, actually, finding from NASA's Curiosity rover. That sample that was collected on the surface of Mars, and it seems to contain a type of carbon that, on Earth, it could be associated with the biological process. Yeah. What do you think about it?
I'm really excited. I am cautiously optimistic. Let me put it that way. As if you read any of the articles that have come out about it, NASA is very quick to say we can't jump to conclusions. This supports our belief that there was once life on Mars, or there may actually still be life there. There's several things that we know as facts. We know that there's water in abundance, just like on the moon. All of us, Israel, the European Space Agency, Russia, China, the United States, we've all shown with our satellite imaging that there is water ice on the poles of the moon. So we know that there is water there, and wherever there's water, there is the potential for life, because water contains the basic building blocks for what we know as life today. So finding the carbon material that is matches what we think makes up our bodies was incredible news for us. We're hoping to find more signs of things like methane, the gas methane, because that has several messages for us. It says that probably some type of life, maybe plant life, existed on Mars at some time, if not, biological life, because methane is produced generally when things are buried and decompose or deteriorate, and then methane is one of the gases that is produced. If that's true, that's another sign that life once existed on Mars. So we're looking for all of those nice hints so that when people get there, we can actually go to some of these sites where we found these hints, and we can look even more closely. Humans can take samples and make definitive decisions or assessments as to whether life actually existed there or does now. The other good thing about methane is it's a fuel. So we can fly to Mars, land a lander and an ascent vehicle, and not have to worry about fuel, because we can get methane and water along with hydrogen and oxygen from the Martian soil, and we can refuel our rocket right there on the surface of Mars and not have to take that fuel with us. So it cuts down the cost because it decreases the weight required to go to Mars and everything. So lots of benefits from it. So we're really excited.
That's exciting, and we thanks NASA that waits for the Israeli Space Week to start with the publication.
Yeah.
With that, so we still have time for a few questions. Itai, you lead the show.
Yeah. So we have some more questions from the crowd. As you said, it's a very exciting. It doesn't matter what phrase you use, either a new space, but it's a new space era, and some of our viewers today would probably be some of the explorers, either as astronauts or as scientists or in any other position, would be part of this exciting era. The things that we might discover on Mars, or the technologies that would assist us to get there. We have with us some of the Israeli Space Agency's scholars, and we have young professionals as well, not just high school students. And our next question is from Eyal Ben Zeev. Eyal, you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. Hi, Charlie. My name is Eyal Ben Zeev. As Itai said, I'm an ISU alumni, a scholar from the Israeli Space Agency. I also manage Israel's leading space podcast called Al Halal. And my question to you is, what do you think is the best way Israel can contribute to the Artemis Accords? You're muted.
Just a second.
There we go. Okay. I didn't realize once I mute myself, I'm muted forever unless you unmute me. So Eyal, to answer your question, Israel and the Israel Space Agency are already contributing to the Artemis program. I mentioned before the radiation vest that we're going to have on one of the mannequins on board. Believe it or not, a lot of the sensors that we use for our altitude determination, a lot of the work that we have done in lasers if you want to talk about how do we determine the distance between a spacecraft and something that it's trying to rendezvous with or attach, frequently nowadays we use laser range finding and the like. Those are kinds of things that working in cooperation with Israeli companies or even the Israeli Defense Force we've developed through the years. One of my best examples, I showed you earlier and I'm not saying that Israel did this and it directly came, but you taught us some things that we use to contribute to what's going on. I showed you the James Webb Space Telescope. One of the ways that I try to describe James Webb, for any of you who may have served already in the Israeli Army or Air Force or anything else, you probably learned how to use night vision goggles. Night vision goggles take the nighttime and turn it into day. They look in the infrared range, which takes very, very low energy forms and converts it into something we can see. That's exactly what the James Webb Space Telescope does. It's an infrared imaging telescope that takes incredibly low power energy from 13.6 billion years away and enables us to view it in ways that we could never do before, because we could only view in the visual range, on a range that we just couldn't detect from that far away. So James Webb is going to turn, if you will, when we talk about going back to the beginning of time, the Big Bang, it's going to turn the darkness of the Big Bang into daylight, so that we can see what happened that many light years away. So Israel is already contributing in many ways. When we have Etan fly with AX-1, there again, Israel will have its second astronaut to go to space. It's always unfortunate to lose someone, but it's what was most particularly unfortunate about losing Ilan was we lost his voice. We lost his ability to come back and communicate personally with each of you and with children around Israel and the world to talk about the value of space flight and what his experiences were. That's probably the biggest thing, the biggest contribution that Israel and other nations are going to be able to make. Remember when I talked about needing communicators, it's going to be able to take people who have had that experience and get them out, not just into Israel and the Middle East, but around the world, to say, hey, here's the experience I had, here's what I saw, here's what I think we can now do, and have them express that to people in all kinds of different ways, so that we influence governments around the world, particularly there in Israel, to continue to fund the work of the Israel Space Agency and continue to allow Israel to stay on the cusp of a leading nation when it comes to space exploration. Hopefully I didn't bore you with my long answer to your short question.
Thank you very much.
That was a fascinating answer. And actually, it's interesting because people not necessarily are aware of what many astronauts says, that for each astronaut, for each project that's being launched into space, there are thousands and tens of thousands of professionals that has to support this effort, and funding that needs to be raised. And that's exactly what you mentioned. That's the important part we need to do. So fascinating question and answer. And for our next question, I invite Shirel. Shirel?
Hello, hi. First of all, thank you for the fascinating talk. I am Shirel. I'm a satellite system engineer in the space industry, and I'm also an alumnus of the International Space University, a scholar of the Israel Space Agency. I enjoyed very much your talk, and I would like to ask you, how do private stations, like space stations such as the Axiom, that you are part of their board, contribute to promoting science and humanity in the short term? Or maybe they're just an opportunity for people that can afford it.
Shirel, fantastic question. And what we hope will happen with the commercial space stations or private space stations is that we will have an opportunity to expose far more people to the experience of flying in space or doing experiments in space than happens today on the International Space Station. You know, that's one destination, one vehicle, very tightly controlled by the 5 space agencies that run the International Space Station. We think if we have multiple platforms in different orbits of Earth, then we will have an opportunity to bring more people in to have the opportunity to fly. Etan is just the first of an international cadre of people that we hope to fly with Axiom on their space station that they'll actually start constructing in 2024. So it will, for a short period of time, be mounted on the International Space Station to make sure that everything works, and then separated and go off as a standalone space station. There's a company called NanoRacks that's working with Lockheed Martin right now to produce another space station. They presently have what's called the Bishop Airlock, and it's a smaller compartment that people can work in as they get ready to go out to space. So it's an interface between the space environment and the comfortable controlled environment of the space station itself. The airlock can be depressurized and pressurized in order to allow people to go back and forth between space and the International Space Station. And it's the largest airlock that we have on board right now. So that's what I think the private entities will bring, is more experience, more opportunities for people like you to fly, because you're already in the industry, and it is even here in the United States, we frequently nowadays look for people who are already in the space industry, who have some limited experience that we can take and build upon to make them astronauts and give them the opportunity to fly. So don't know whether you have an interest in flying in the future or not, but if not, keep doing what you're doing so that others can continue to fly and have the experiences we're having.
Thank you. I hope to be there one day.
You will.
Yeah, I also hope to be there, hopefully, not too long from now. And we also have time for just one last question for this session. And this time our question is from Michal. Michal? Michal, את איתנו?
Yes. Hi, everyone. My name is Michal Ziso. I'm an architect and entrepreneur, and I research human-centered design solutions for environments for humans outside of Earth. It's great seeing you again, Charlie. My question is a direct continuation to the old space, new space, or new old space even conversation. So how do you predict future progress of collaboration between the US and Israel? Will it become more open to individuals or remain mostly between agencies? Thank you.
Interesting question, Mikhail. And I actually think that today we probably work more extensively with private organizations, civilian companies and commercial entities in Israel than we do in any other country. Most of our work with our other partners, say the European Space Agency, the Russians, the Japanese, that's almost all through the agency itself. In Israel, we've been fortunate enough to have the Israel Space Agency that opens the door and supports collaboration between NASA and private Israeli companies. And I expect that will continue. I personally would like to see us work even more closely with the Israel Space Agency, NASA, and ISA, but I would not want to detract from the ability for us to still continue to work with the private sector, the private entities there in Israel. But as I go back to using my favorite term again, Israel is the innovation country of the world, and so we really need for you all to continue to do what you do, to be the test bed, the incubator for new technologies and new medicines and new methods of taking care of human beings the way that you're doing, whether it's with food production or production of pharmaceuticals and the like, because you do it and you do it incredibly well. So I don't imagine that we're going to decrease the amount of collaboration that we do with individual entities in Israel. But I would like to see us strengthen the NASA Israel Space Agency relationship such that we do a few more things. But in order to do that, I go back to what Director Oran said. We've got to get more funding from the Israeli government to strengthen the space agency so that they can do, kind of match some of the things that we here in NASA do. And I think through collaboration, I call him Senator still, Bill Nelson, the current NASA administrator, between Administrator Nelson and Director Oran, they're both pretty good, pretty sharp guys. So I think they're going to be able to collaborate and figure out a way to shore up the funding, both from the Knesset in Israel and from the Congress here in the United States.
I will jump in, Michal, just to complete from my side. The answer is both. There is a role for agencies, but the way I see it, we are in an era that we must, not can, but must involve individuals as well as private companies. And just look at the Rakia mission. That's the story. A private person goes and collaborate with a private company going into an international space station that was built by governments and execute experiments. That's the story. We cannot allow ourselves just to be in the government agency anymore. That will stop us. So I just will continue, Charlie, answer. Yes, we must, both of them.
And let me add one thing to that, because a caution, because here in the United States, one of the things that I always get asked is, is NASA going to go out of business because of companies like SpaceX. That is not something that concerns me because it is the federal agency, it's the NASA and the Israel Space Agency that provide the leadership and the foundational work. We do the risky stuff, as I mentioned before. We do the high cost stuff initially and then pass it off to the private sector to round it out and to do it over a long period of time. I think if we think that we're going to pass everything off to the private sector and expect for them to do the research and development and come up with a strategic plan for deep space exploration and the like, that will end up in disaster because private sector is generally profit driven and profit doesn't always think about long-term goals and aspirations that have no return on investment. So the biggest difference between what Director Oren and I did when heading space agencies is I was concerned about how to present what we do in terms of return on investment that people on the outside understand. That was not something that we could easily measure. You know, the Israeli Space Agency, I'm not sure that they could measure what the return on investment of every dollar that goes into the Israeli Space Agency. They can go to, say, a company like Space Pharma or somebody else and let them present their investments and the return on their investments. And I think that's directly attributable to the support that they got from the government just to get started, because they had to start somewhere. And as a general rule, the government acts sort of as the seed funds or the what here in America we call the anchor tenant. So people know that if they, you know, have an idea, NASA is going to be the anchor tenant. We're going to be there for the duration as long as they want to continue to experiment and do research. We can't keep them alive, but we can provide the kind of the funds that'll keep them going and help them tell their story to other people to build their business, if you will.
Thanks, Charlie. Thanks so much. We almost run out of time, but there is still one question I would like to ask that actually I'm thinking about along this conversation. Where do you see yourself in 10 years from now? What projects will you be involved? I mean, can you elaborate about your future and how that's going to be part of the space environment?
Well, I hope you all won't laugh, but I up until Shatner flew on Blue Origin a few months ago, I was thinking that I was 2 years away from becoming one of the oldest human beings to go to space. I was waiting to be 77 like Senator John Glenn when he flew his shuttle mission. And when he was living, he and I used to not joke about it, we used to talk about it. And he told me that I couldn't fly before I was 77 because we needed more data points from octogenarians and near octogenarians. And then William Shatner flew. I'm not waiting until I'm 90. So when you ask me where do I hope to be in 10 years, my hope is that I will be able to tell people about one more space flight, one more space experience, and that I'll continue to be working for my son the way I do now and helping him and my daughter advance the cause of medicine and aeronautics and science for the benefit of humankind.
Charlie, thanks so much, not just for the answer and not just for the last hour, but for your contribution and friendship with Israel and the part and the great part that you are taking in lead us to a very, very, very fascinating and bright future. So thanks so much for the time. We're anxious to see you here face to face. I'm sure we'll be able to do it very soon, hopefully, but I know we can before next year. So we are waiting for you here. Myself and my colleagues and the children are waiting to see you. Thanks so much. And if that's okay with you, I will jump just to conclude in a few words in Hebrew, if that's okay with you, Charlie. So thanks so much.
Shalom.
Shalom. תודה רבה לכולם ותודה רבה לאיתי ולכל החברים. אני חושב שזו הייתה שעה מרתקת ולחיבור בין עבר לבין עתיד, לבין חינוך, לבין הדברים שאנחנו רוצים לעשות כולנו. חשוב לי מאוד שתצטרפו אלינו למשדרים הבאים שיהיו לנו בשבוע החלל. יש לנו את המשדר המרכזי מחר בבוקר, ב-10:30, עם אליאנה תידר ועודד פז, ועם האסטרונאוט ויקטור גלובר. הוא הראשון שהטיס חללית דרגון של ספייסיס לתחנת החלל הבינלאומית. זה משדר גם לתלמידי היסודי, אבל בעצם לכל תלמידי ישראל, זה מחר בבוקר. ויש לנו את משדר הערב המרכזי לשבוע החלל, ביום שלישי ב-18:00, שוב עם אילנה ועודד פז. הוא קורא לאלה מכם שיהיו איתנו בכנס החלל על שם אילן רמון, שיסתיים ממש באותה השעה, אז אנחנו נפתח את משדר הערב. תצטרף אלינו גם האסטרונאוטית ג'סיקה מאייר, שלה יש קשר מאוד מאוד מיוחד לישראל. היא תספר לנו על התוכניות שלה ושל נאסא לנחות על הירח. המשדר הזה יהיה פתוח לכל המשפחה, וחוץ מזה יש לנו עוד הרבה מאוד פעילויות, כמו שאתם מכירים, גם הפרסומים וגם באתר של סוכנות החלל. אז איתי, תודה רבה לצ'רלי, תודה רבה לכם, ושיהיה לנו המשך שבוע מעולה לכולנו. המשך יום טוב.
Great.
פעילויות, ניסויים ומשחקים אינטראקטיביים
גם אנחנו נהיה שם.
23 עד 27 בינואר. כל הפרטים באתר סוכנות החלל הישראלית.
טוב, נהגוס, תתניע, חוזרים לכדור הארץ. הגיע הזמן. גם לא נוח בחללית הזאת.